Hello everyone, welcome to the stream. I hope you are all doing well. So today's stream we are going to be discussing with Ed from the Armored Archives. We're going to be talking about what goes into researching tanks, maybe the difficulties of it, and sort of the process in case you are interested in getting into researching tanks yourself. Because if you're going to do it, you need to do it right. Otherwise, you end up with things like the M3 Lancer. So, to start off, we're going to bring on Ed. He'll introduce himself again, and then I'm going to start off with some current events, or a current event of something happening in the world of tanking, because I think that's kind of an interesting way to talk about recent events without having to cover them in a video and having to dig into stuff that you might not be able to find sourcing for. Not going to be serious, just going to be a fun little thing to start the stream, and then we'll get into the main topic. If you guys want to have specific questions answered, we may try to do some throughout the stream, but we're going to do a little bit at the end with some Q&A. If you really want your question answered, you can help support the stream by using a super chat, and we will get to those towards the end once the conversation seems to have kind of wrapped up. So, let's bring on Ed, and he can reintroduce himself. All right, you should be able to hear me now, Ed. Let me just bring.
I can.
There, now you can hear. So go ahead and reintroduce yourself as I switch over to the other view, so you can look at my ugly face. And Ed can introduce himself, let you guys know about him, his channel, and then we can look at the current event that I have picked for today. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Ed.
Okay. So obviously, my name is Ed. I do the Armored Archives channel. I used to work at Bovington Tank Museum as a volunteer there for many years. I now spend my time helping up different authors, be it Hilary Doyle, Steve Zaloga, and so on. And I spend most of my time either in the archives or in and around tanks doing various measurements and helping other people. And then I decided to start putting all this onto YouTube just because I had nothing better to do a few years ago. And yeah, these days I spend my time doing similar things to that and helping people like Cone out. So he'll come to me and ask me if I've got any information I can help him with, and I'm usually more than happy to help the cool people out. Like you, Cone.
All right. So for today's little bit of an interesting topic, or just an interesting little thing happening in the world of tanking. I don't know how many of you are aware of the little, what are they called? The Russian games with their tanks where they run them around, the tank biathlon, that's what it's called.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the Sudanese tank crew seem to have had a little bit of trouble with their driver. As we can see here, he drove off of the track and then proceeded to drive through the field and just kept on going, drove right back over the track, didn't realize he missed it, and kept on rolling. It got so bad they had to send out a crew to get the tank back on track, and then on the next lap the tank proceeded to take a corner too sharp and block the crew behind it, which luckily that tank crew got to go again the next day. But definitely some interesting stuff going on in the biathlon this year.
I think he's just having the time of his life. I mean, he's never been out of Sudan. He's been given a tank and like a country he can just drive around in. He's just having a bit of fun. I'm backing this guy. I'm backing this guy the whole way.
Oh, here it is, the tank, the Russian soldiers guiding him back onto the track after he drove way off. Yeah, I just thought that was pretty interesting, especially after the other ones of the malfunction of swinging a loaded gun towards the audience with one tank crew and then another tank crew managing to get their gun jammed. So definitely some interesting stuff going on. I wouldn't say that it's more down to the tanks as much as the crew, because the T-72 has definitely proven that it is a reliable vehicle. But
it's always the crew on these. It's always the crew. But, you know, I think maybe he's just trying to find, like, an improved shortcut. Maybe he's like, well, if it's a timed-based event, I can just cut this corner, that corner, and this half of the map off. I'm all for him winning now. Team Sudan.
All right, so I guess now that we've gotten that out of the way, unfortunately, I didn't have any other interesting things that I found. There was the whole thing of the Chinese supposedly rolling out tanks at one of their banks, but that's pretty much been debunked from what I saw, so not going to talk about that until I see more about it. But now I guess we can get into the main topic. So we were talking a bit before the stream started, and maybe you can kind of start people off on the importance of doing proper research for tanks, and then we can get into more of the how.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is one of the biggest issues at the moment, with especially with social media and people discussing tank stuff, is that we end up in this huge cesspit of circular sourcing, where people are just taking information off things like World of Tanks forums and just circulating it around until misconceptions become the truth. And what needs to be done is, if you're going to do this properly and you're going to do research properly, you go up to an archive and you dig out the original source material and you find all that, and then you cross-reference that and you check those sources as well, and you compare against all the other information you got until you get the correct data. And it's so common these days. People go, "Well, I've done my research." And like, what do you mean? They go, "Well, I googled something." Like, that's not research, is it? That's where the problems come into it. Could you imagine if you went to see your doctor and you went, "Oh yeah, I did my research. I just like looked at Wikipedia." You'd start to worry. But with tank stuff, this is all too common. So that's why I sort of spend my time up in the archives and going through literally thousands and thousands and thousands of pages to get the information I need to get. And again, when I was doing some work for Wargaming, so if you play World of Tanks and any of the British tanks really for the last 5 years with the work I was doing for them, bar a few of their monstrously fake things, and sometimes that'd be 14,000 pages of information would go over to their historical team. I mean, they still cocked it up, obviously, but the work was done correctly.
Yeah. So I guess I can start a little bit and talk from my perspective as more of like someone that hasn't done a lot of the digging like you have in the archives. Because when I started out, obviously, I was relying primarily on books and online sources, which is a lot of what I still rely on, with the exception of British stuff, since you have a lot of the stuff that you can provide to me. But you definitely have to be careful from what I've found, because you can get a book that everything seems to check out in, and then you find out later that the information is completely wrong and has been debunked for like 20 years because the book is old.
Yeah,
and
massively.
That's the trouble with what you were saying with circular sourcing. A lot of those books, like something I'm gonna be talking about in a video soon, the M3 Lee and its nickname of Coffin for Seven Brothers. I can't find a original source that actually refers to it as that, and everybody just says that it was called that by the crew. There's no evidence of when it was, no evidence of who called it that, when it was called that, just that it was called that. And from what I'm seeing, it looks like it may be a myth. So there's definitely a lot of issues with using books and stuff as sources when you don't have the original sourcing, because it's very hard to fact check people on stuff like that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the one I did a little video on a while back was the Arvery with the 290mm gun. Now, if you type in Arvery 290mm, you'll see it all over the internet. It's everywhere. But if you sort of Google books, you'll see how many different books that crops up in. And it's from Ospreys. It's in books from the Royal. Even the Royal Engineers have put it in their book. And the incredible thing is, if you actually go and measure it, you'll realize that's an incorrect measurement. It's not a little bit off. It's massively off. And so when you start tracing these books, you come back to an original source where they've made a mistake. And then two different authors have copied that. Then authors have copied that mistake, and so on. It just spirals all the way down until something becomes the known truth, even though it isn't. And there's a huge amount of this in tank lore, where people have this idea that certain vehicles are amazing, certain vehicles are terrible, certain things that existed when they didn't. The other famous one, of course, is the Death Traps book with Shermans, called Death Traps and Ronsons and Tommy Cookers and all that sort of stuff. And it's all absolute bollocks, but it comes from one major source book that everyone just then rinsed and repeated that over and over and over, until as soon as you type the word Sherman online, someone's like, Ronson, Tommy Cooker, Ronson, Tommy Cooker in the chat. And it's the major problem with tank lore today, is that very, very few people actually do authentic research now. They just copy what they see somewhere else.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate too because I believe that Death Trap's book actually has a lot of decent information in it too, because it has some of the stuff on the super Pershing, because I believe it was the people in that who were the one that did all the modifications to that vehicle. So there is good information in those, but at the same time, it's like when you got to go in between and kind of pick out what's important.
Yeah, so I mean,
using
Belton Cooper worked in the
other
engineer
sources.
recovering vehicles, so he did see a lot of burnt out Shermans. But then you get like confirmation bias in the sense that
Yeah.
if all you're seeing is Shermans, then all you think is that Shermans are burning. You're not seeing the enemy stuff because you're not recovering those.
Yeah, that's the issue with that book. It's like it's very good information, but it's heavily biased because you're looking at it from the view of, it'd be like asking a mechanic how reliable a vehicle is when they're working on like different vehicles and stuff all the time. They're going to tell you that tons of cars are unreliable when maybe it's just the people driving them or something like that.
Yeah, I mean,
It's hard to get.
clarification. It would be like
Yeah.
saying that you're a larder mechanic and all you specialize is broken down larders,
That's a
not any
better,
other car. So you're going to turn around and say, "What a larder's like?" You're like, "Oh, they're terrible. I see 50 a day." Of course you, because that's what you work on.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not seeing anything else. He also tended to get involved. So with things like Pershing, he started getting involved or talking about the development of Pershing and what the generals were doing and so on. And that was information at the time he hadn't got a clue about. It was, what he'd discussed down the pub with his friends. And that sort of came out. So people had this idea that they didn't want the Pershing over in Europe and it was a terrible idea. And it's absolutely load of bollocks. But it all comes down to him. So if you see people saying, "Oh yeah, but actually Monet didn't want the Pershing," you're like, rubbish. Yes, he did. Stop picking through those tiny little bits of sources. But it's the other famous one, of course, that drives me absolutely crazy is Covenanter, the little British cruiser. That as soon as you see anybody talking about British tanks, say, "Oh yeah, and don't forget how bad Covenanter was." Well, it wasn't. When it first came out, obviously it was rushed off the drawing board in order to get the factories that are building tanks to quickly develop and change over, from railway factories and so on. And so the initial Mark Ones were a bit of a complete dog's dinner. There's no denying that. So was Crusader and Churchill. I mean, Churchill was far worse when it came out. But they quickly set to fixing this. And so by the time you get to the Mark IV Covenanter, shortly afterwards, it's recorded as the most reliable tank in British service, including American vehicles. And it was an absolutely brilliant vehicle, which is why it remained in training for so long. But of course, as soon as you talk about Covenanter, people go, "Oh, terrible vehicle," And you're like, "Okay, what's your source?" "Well, this book by David Fletcher." You're like, "Well, which are you going to trust? Are you going to trust literally the engineers and the drivers and the users that are writing about it in 1942, 43, saying absolutely fixed, it's brilliant, or somebody that wrote about it in 1980? And for me, I will always take the original source information of the actual people that are handling it and using it than somebody that's got his own predisposed bias against it. But
Yeah.
it can be very hard when something is so ingrained in public knowledge to try and shake that,
All right, so now that we've kind of discussed a little bit of the issues with the current way that a lot of people do their research with tanks, maybe we can talk a little bit about like the proper way to do it, because obviously you can get a lot of good information online. There's places like, although you can't trust everything that you find on them because sometimes the sourcing isn't the best and the people that have written them maybe haven't used the best sourcing for it. But you've got places like Tank Encyclopedia that do a pretty good job. There's a lot of decent books out there, so there are good sources of information. But when it comes to getting that information, that goes to more people like you and other people in the community who go and actually find the information. So you can kind of maybe talk a little bit about how that's done, because a lot of people probably haven't thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, if you know someone that goes to archives and regularly goes up there, and it's a bit tricky because it's not like we have a sort of a website and say, register with us sort of thing. It's very much a case of who you know, really. You start to know people as you get into the subject, that who you can trust and who you can't trust, who does their information. So regarding books, there's a couple of people, like my friend Craig Moore. He's an author and he's done the books How to Kill a Tiger Tank and How to Kill a Panther Tank. And I can verify those because I've been in the archive while he's been sat next to me doing that research, taking those pictures, recording that information. So with authors like that, I can certainly say, yeah, get the book, read it, it's good. Another guy that does some really good tank books is a guy called PM Knight. They're very dry. They're basically going through the original manuals and the workshop reports and so on. And often when I go up into the archives, I'll find his ticket stubs where he's had work done for him for PM Knight. So you know that's good information. I guess it's just a case of like digging around and finding out which authors have done first-hand on-site research and which ones have just copy and pasted. But without starting to name and shame, that's a very awkward subject to do. And again, the other one is a little bit about knowing what the material is you're going through. So, for example, Nick Moran, the chieftain, has done some good books on American tanks. Terrible covers, but good books. And he goes up to NARA and he spends days at a time at NARA. They make the American National Archives in America. So you know that stuff's kind of good because you know what the author is, you know what he does. And there's other books out there that come up with stuff on like Chinese armor or stuff, or North Korean armor. Much more tricky because you know for a fact they haven't been to North Korean archive.
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit about knowing how easy is the information to get hold of, what's the chance that author has gone to that archive or had access to those vehicles. You know, if you've got somebody that's an American author that's writing about every Chinese vehicle, you have to ask yourself, have you gone to China and gone to a Chinese archive? It's unlikely. Have you been measuring the latest Chinese tanks inside and outside? Very unlikely. So you sort of take things with a pinch of salt.
So what is the process of that like to actually go into the archive? Because it would, you'd assume that they're probably closed off, they kind of keep the stuff. Because a lot of the things, especially the newer stuff, is heavily restricted on who can get to it. We were talking a little bit before this, and you mentioned how in the US you can't get the information on the V2s because they think people are going to go out and build their own V2s. But how do you kind of get in the door and then find the information? Because it is obviously not easy.
Most archives are fairly simple. You'll need to go along initially with some identification. They will give you a reader's ticket. Usually looks like a little credit card thing. You'll need that to access the computers and all the documents. When you're in an archive, most of them, then you'll start going through all the information that they have. So it's usually got like a search engine these days, like put your stuff in. That's usually you get your first hurdle because, unsurprisingly, archives are full of archivists. And archivists aren't normally historians. So what they are very, very good at is making sure that the boxes are correct, the temperature is correct, that the documents are looked after in the correct manner, but they don't always know what they're looking at, and they will just record something under whatever title is. So, for example, if you give an archivist a picture of a Panzer IV, and underneath it has Tiger on it, they will file it under Tiger because that's what they think it is, because that's what it says on the document itself. So later on, when you're coming along and you're looking for that particular Panzer IV, you won't find it unless you start looking under Tiger stuff. Yeah. What you want is a really good balance of somebody that not only knows how to archive and look after the documents correctly, but also knows what they're looking at. And if you can imagine how many different types of documents and subjects are in an archive, the National Archives in America, for example, have 7 billion documents. You'd have to have someone that specializes in everything. It can't be done. So there's your first hurdle generally, is that a lot of files that you're looking for, unless you stumble across them by chance, you may never well find them. For example, National Archives in the UK, I was looking at the A30 Avenger tank, and if you type in A30, where you come up with the A30 Road and all stuff, but nothing there. Avenger, absolutely nothing. So no matter how many different times you go through the Cruiser Avenger and so on, it won't find anything. And yet, under a liaison report, 1952, there it was, a whole wodge of pictures of it, because somebody had simply read the first text cover, liaison report, put that in as the title, and there's no description. So those things that can, you can actually lose your temper on sometimes. Other things, again, they don't usually include pagination, which is how many pages are in a file. So sometimes you go, oh wow, look at this, top secret Tiger document, brilliant. And you'll get it, and it's like one A5 page. That's it, just one-sided in the folder. Other ones can be very misleading. I certainly remember looking for one that came up, and it was a great big document. It was called Developments at Chobham. I thought, brilliant, here we go. It's MOD, Developments at Chobham. This could be what I'm after. I want some more Chobham Armor stuff. And it wasn't. What it was about 800 pages to do with the different farmers that live on Chobham Common arguing with the MOD over how they can graze their cattle and sheep back and forth. 800 pages talking about sheep at Chobham Common. But because it was just called Developments at Chobham, yeah, it looked good, but of course, waste of absolute time. Now, regarding the American system, the American archives is absolutely colossal. They have the same problem with things misfiled or lost and so on. And sometimes you have to think in a sort of a roundabout solution how you can get that information.
Yeah.
So you might go, right, well, I want to look up this particular tank, M103, and you go, okay, here's 10 documents we have on it. But what you'll find is if you look under things like where political records are kept and records of policy and Senate records, you'll find a whole load more because tanks are heavily tied in with politics when they're going through development. Under accounting, because accountants keep records of everything, you'll find bills of sale, prices, how much every nut and bolt cost will often be under there. If you look under things like the Foreign Office, you'll find all the export options. And sometimes when you find this, you'll actually find the original attachments. So you'll find a letter sent from a developer to a senator or a politician, and it'll be the initial overlay, and it'll say, please see attachment here, and you'll have the whole wodge that you're looking for to go through. And so when you're looking for stuff with tanks, you're not just looking for armor, gun, thickness, speed, top trump stuff. That's rubbish. But what you're looking for is all the nitty gritty detail. And that's what you'll find in all these offsite parts. Other bits to do with NARA that are a bit more awkward is, again, as you mentioned with V2. So I passed a whole wad of information over to Steve Zaloga a while back because he likes missiles. People think he's a tank man. He's not. He's a missile man. And he was really happy because it was the very first photos of V2 ever seen, the aerial reconnaissance of V2 and the initial discussions of V2 and so on. They're quite humorous between Winston Churchill and some of his lackeys. Now, Steve couldn't get hold of the V2 stuff at NAR anymore because it's been reclassified because potentially it instructs people how to build a cruise missile or, even bigger missile. So a lot of stuff like that is locked away, whereas the British archives are like, yeah, go ahead, build a V2, it'll be fun. The Americans are a lot more sensitive of what they keep. So yeah, these are just some of the challenges you face. But the biggest challenge is if you think you're going to just wander in there, type in tank and being given the Holy Grail, you're grossly mistaken. It's taken me absolutely years to find the information I have of going up there and trying different combinations or finding, sometimes you're going through a document and going, right, hang on, I've got this chap's name, he's an engineer or a welder. And then he'll say, oh, please see my letter I sent to so-and-so. So you're like, right, let me go and see if I can find anything under that guy and start searching his personal letters and see if I can find more information. Usually you can only order so many documents a day or so many documents an hour. So with the National Archives, you can do a bulk order. And a bulk order can only be from one series. So like W194, which is Tank Development and Research. You can only order under those in your bulk, and you can order 40 files. If you go up otherwise, you can do 12 files in advance, and then every hour you can go up to the computers and order 3 more documents, and they take up to an hour to deliver. So that's where it gets really frustrating, where you order 3 more documents and one of them's a single page.
Yeah.
Because you're now going to have to go and sit and drink tea for 40 minutes, which isn't the worst way you could waste your time, I suppose.
So what's the process that'll happen? Because obviously, like you said, it can be tricky to even find things to begin with. But what happens when you do find something that you're looking for, or you think you found something, but it pops up and it says that it's classified? Or how does that process work? Because obviously, there's stuff that's still classified.
It depends. See, the American side, it just say classified, you can't have access to it, tough luck. With the UK stuff, generally, if it's classified or it's withheld by, say, like the MOD, it should say on the initial file. It doesn't always, so sometimes you go up there and we can't give you that one because it turns out that it's been withheld. So a while back, for example, the mechanics of Chobham Armor was supposed to have been put for public use in September last year, and they were previously held by the MOD. Unfortunately, somebody that's a keen gamer wrote to the MOD first and really asked access, because they wanted the information for War Thunder for the tanks. And the MOD took one look and went, this looks like a lot of work, doesn't it? So they just reclassified it for another 5 years.
Yeah, after the leaks of recent era, I can't really blame them too much for that.
It is, and they've had more than that one famous leak, unfortunately. So they're very uppity on their edge with this one. So even though in that front it was now declassified because it's the 1960s stuff. Really, it's a lot of work to go through declassification. You've got to read through everything. You've got to make sure that it's all valid. It's got to go through a lot of loopholes, bureaucracy, and paperwork. It's much easier for them to go, not my problem for 5 years. It's somebody else's job.
Yeah.
If it'd been approached properly and correctly from an academic side, they would have probably have done it. But because it's somebody saying, "I love tanks in games," they were like, "No," and that was the end of that. So you do get that a little bit. Other stuff that's classified or state secret. Say, for example, if you go to Bovington Tank Museum, they have a lot of documentation there that is still secret. If you go out the back in the archives where I was, there's a lot of boxes that will have things like not for public use or a display date on the box. So can be displayed 2025 onwards. You'll never know it's there because when you go into the museum and say, do you have this or that? They'll look on their computer system called Tracer. They'll be like, and they'll be like, no matches found. And that's because nobody puts it onto Tracer because it's got a thing, or it'll say not for public use, and they won't even tell you that they have it until the date ticks over. Quite a lot of files you'll obviously see secret stamped on them sometimes, which causes a bit of confusion.
Yeah.
Because there was a time where people didn't bother to declassify secret stuff. So, for example, the Cavalier tank that came out before Cromwell, that was actually classified until 1972, and it's still stamped as secret. I'm sure the Russians can't wait to get their hands on all that information.
Well, it's really cutting edge stuff, I'm sure.
Yeah. Other vehicles like the Chieftain, for example, and things like the Stormer are still classified as top secret. But of course, nobody cares because there's plenty of Chieftains in public use. And even though Stormers are now being sent out to places like Ukraine, there's also ones in private hands. So it's very kind of funny. If you go into Bovington and say, can I have access on something about the Chieftain, they'll hand it over. If you say, can I have access on information about the Warrior, even though it's also, they won't. They'll give you what they can and what they can't. Generally, with tanks, what you're looking for is information on engines becomes available first. Information on guns second. Armor still gets locked away for many, many years. It's just one of those little irritating factors.
So going back to that thing you were talking about before, where you go in and you search for something and then you get something completely different, like the searching for Tiger, and then you end up with like a Panzer IV picture. Well, I can kind of show people an answer. I saw a couple questions in the chat about online sources that you can use. One of the ones that I use is the online National Archives, which is very incomplete, but there is some good stuff on there. But even here, I've gone ahead and I've searched Tiger tank up at the top, and we've got starting King Tiger, German tank knocked out. Then you've got like the captured Tiger. Third picture down, that's a Panther, and it says here, original caption, 5th Army, Italy, destroyed Tiger, and then in parentheses, Panther Mark V. So at least they realized it wasn't a Tiger. But then further down, we've got tank, and then Tiger tanks in the caption, but it's a picture of a half-track, and it looks like maybe a Sherman or a Sherman Jumbo. And then further down, we get to like Jag Tiger and Panzer IV and a Panther. So even searching something specific like this with something as famous as the Tiger, it's all just a jumble of random, like you've got just a random picture here, which has nothing to do with the Tiger tank.
Yeah.
At least not directly. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff
so with
that you have to dig
there,
through
for example,
like that.
It's not a Tiger tank. And if you particularly said, "Oh, I really want to find a picture of a Sherman and a half track together," and you'd be typing there Sherman half track, Sherman half track, and Sherman with half track, it won't find anything. You go, okay, Tiger, there it is. So yeah, sometimes it can drive you absolutely mad trying to find information like that. And archives are full of typos and mistakes. And with the online stuff, of course, it's only a fraction of what they've actually got around to doing. So yeah, the Imperial War Museum and National Archives both have online stuff. You can find some good little bits, but the only way of really doing it is just to go in there and start searching through everything bit by bit. Just give me 1 minute though, Cone. I'll be right back.
Yeah, so anybody who wants to use this specific website, all you have to do is you just search up National Archives, and it should show up. You'll have a page like this. Do be warned, there is some not so politically correct things nowadays, but it's historical content, so you have to take that into consideration. But I've used it for quite a few things. I was able to find footage of Pearl Harbor for one of my videos. I don't know if there's let's see if there's anything on the mouse in here. Oh, it does look like there's some reports and stuff on here. Are there any images? Doesn't look like it specifically. But there probably are somewhere, you just have to search specifically. But yeah, if you want to use this, this is a decent source, and this is archival things. So for the most part, I wouldn't say you can 100% trust the information, but it's archival documentation, so it's first-hand sourcing, and you can kind of use that in conjunction with other information, and I have done that. One example is for the Mark 8 tank, which I did my video on. There is a lot of information on here. If it will load, maybe it's not going to load for me, but there was a lot of information on here. I found videos of the thing being tested in, I believe it was in Bridgeport, Connecticut, where they tested it. I found images of it being constructed and all the different parts of it. It seems like maybe I searched something different. Maybe I searched Liberty Tank. Yeah, I did search Liberty Tank. But you can find a lot of good information on these sites, and it's definitely worth using. Somebody's asking, can you use National Archives for YouTube videos? You should be able to.
Yes, yeah, you can.
All of this stuff is, it will say on it, like, let's just click on this M4 Sherman picture. It will say down at the bottom sometimes that it says basically that, oh, this one says unrestricted. Sometimes it will say that it's like they're not sure about the copyright or stuff like that.
NARA's got more problems.
From my experience and the kind of my own opinion, all of this stuff is old enough to be in public domain. So if you're taking it from the archives, I'm gonna go on the side that you're pretty safe. But
yeah, you are.
You have to be a little careful.
Some of them generally, NARA, if you're using static images, they like you to give them some credit somewhere along the line. Just, images from NARA. They don't ask so much. They just like you to say thank you in some part of the text somewhere that they use their images. The problem NARA has is they have a lot of film footage, tons and tons of it. So I was helping out a YouTuber and a former friend years ago, Safety Line, with some footage from NARA because they had all the stock images. And no sooner had she put it up than she got the YouTube bots jumping straight away that about eight different YouTube bots had copyrighted it. Now, they don't own it. It does belong to this group. But of course, that doesn't mean anything on YouTube anymore. So you have to watch that. You have to watch bots bringing stuff up and saying, that belongs to me. I'm a Frenchman on some bullshit.
Yeah, there's issues too because there's certain companies, I'm not going to name anybody specifically, but I'm sure you in the chat, if you've watched enough, you'll know the ones I'm referring to, who post the stuff online. And there is, I'm not saying it's illegal for them to do it, but a lot of the stuff that they have may not necessarily be owned only by them. It might be publicly available stuff. Maybe theirs is a little bit clearer in quality or something. And YouTube can, in some cases, you can end up with copyright issues from that. I've never run into it personally, but I could definitely see it happening. And it's not necessarily the company's doing it on purpose. It could just be an auto flagged thing and they see it and they go, oh, someone's using our stuff. Boop, let's put a little claim on them. They should be manually verifying it, but I'm sure they get enough stuff where they don't do it all the time. So you do have to be careful.
The problem with archives full stop is that sometimes you'll find a particular picture. There might be 8 or 9 copies in that one archive file, There'd been the original press copy, there'd have been the dispersed copies, there'd have been, the ones that they gave out to friends and family. Then over the years, those have gone online and they've been copy and pasted, and it becomes very hard to do copyright of who owns that original image now. Because you can say, well, the ones at say, for example, we have the Tank Museum. The ones from 1940, those are Crown copyrights. You don't own copyright to them. The ones online that have come from a book, you don't own copyright to. But if you order that document from, say, the Tank Museum, they make a copy of that copy, which they give to you. They
Oh,
then
yeah.
do have copyright. So there becomes a problem. It becomes a huge clusterfuck to trying to work out who actually owns a copy of that picture. And yeah, it becomes a headache, especially if you put it into a book, because some museums will try to then contact you and say, these images belong to us. And you're like, no, they don't. They were taken in
Yeah.
1940. They're crown copyright. You have no right to them whatsoever. And you're going to get into a legal spattle with them. Yeah,
I
that
haven't run
side you
into
just
that.
deal with.
I haven't run into that specifically, but I did have somebody when I posted some of the footage I had taken at one of the tank demo days, and I had someone leave a comment basically saying I was using a bot to harvest videos from online and then posting them behind a paywall to get people to give me money, which it's like, what? How would I do that, and why would I do that? You're way overthinking how much competence I have with a computer. But yeah, that's not so much an issue, but I've definitely run into issues with especially colorized footage. You have to be really careful with that because, like Ed was saying, they take a scan of it. Now suddenly it belongs to them because they technically made that copy of it. It's kind of the same with footage. It like stuff that's remastered or colorized, you do have to be careful of that because technically it's no longer public domain because it's like a newer version. I'm not sure what the whole legalese is of it. I'm not a copyright lawyer. I'm very glad I'm not a copyright lawyer because that does not sound like a fun job. But
No.
you do have to be careful with that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It comes back to sting you quite a bit. I mean, also some museums are better than others, and some archives are better than others. There's the Birmingham Heritage Museums and the Motor Museum. Now, they are lovely people. They're very, very friendly and very, very helpful. But they also want to charge you for everything. So you can go up there, you can take all their stuff, but they do say, oh, is this for a book or a document or a TV series? And you like, no, it's not. This is for my own research. Because the minute you say you want to publish it,
yeah, they want their slice.
They'll want up to sort of £30 per picture, and if you're thinking about a book, that can be thousands of pounds.
Yeah,
and you can turn around and say, but this is crown copyright. It's 1940s. It's expired. You can't copyright it. And they're like, well, do you own them? No, we do. So if you want a picture, we can charge. Even though you've taken the photos yourself, it becomes a big argument.
Yeah.
Other ones are just downright dishonest. So there's a Glaswegian archive up in Scotland that will try and charge you £125 a photo.
Huh.
And you can turn around and go, but I can get that photo literally anywhere for like £3, you know? So then they have the problem up there. So if you're up there and you're trying to like research that, you get some informational text that they have, and then they go, oh, what about that picture? That's ours. We want £125. And you'd be like, no, that's not your picture. I went to the archives in London and got that one for a reasonable £4. So you can end up having like getting to fight each other over who owns what.
Well, on that topic of taking pictures and stuff, I know a lot of the stuff that you've shown me is obviously you using, I'm guessing, your phone just to snap pictures of the different pages. What sort of things do they allow you to do when you go in? Because I think Chieftain's talked about he'll bring in a little scanner for some of the stuff, and he can kind of scan some of the more important documents that he gets. But what are the sort of restrictions on what you can and can't do with those documents once you get them? Because obviously, obviously they don't want you destroying them because it is historical documents.
No, okay, so when you go in, they have some pretty much clear rules. Anything you bring in with you has to be in a clear see-through bag, which they can look at. There's also on some archives a weighing mat when you go in and out, and it's very sensitive. Mm-hmm. You so much as leave a pencil behind, it can pick up on that one. In case you're trying to bring stuff out, because some of these documents, especially in the archive, and there's things like the Doomsday Book, there's stuff that's 1,000 years old in the National Archives that's there, potentially worth a lot of money. So generally they'll want a clear bag. You go in, you sort of show them left, right, and go in there. You'll pay for a camera license, which lets you take as many pictures as you want in the National Archives, so you can sit there. I have my Google Pix phone that Safety Line brought me. That takes about 3,500 images. I've actually buggered the battery on it completely. They're not that these phones aren't designed to do 4,000 pictures a day. They're brilliant though because they're very handy because you can just sit there and.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same one I have.
A lot of people like to set up like an SLR on a stand and try to like take the images and zooming in and out. And mobile phones, these especially modern mobiles, they're designed to take pictures of fat ugly girls in nightclubs. So they're brilliant for working indoor low light areas with that sort of stuff. And you can get pretty large images, good enough for reading on your screen and even putting into a book.
Yeah.
But again, they're not designed for like doing that repeatedly. So I go through mobile phones at an alarming rate, chewing up the batteries and whatnot. So yeah, they do that on National Archives, whatever, through it goes. The only problem with a lot of archives like them is they tend to have these new neon sort of like friendly light-saving bulbs at the top, these white bulbs, and a lot of papers and photos tend to be gloss. So you'll end up there sort of turning the page left, right, and center and trying to get this perfect angle to try and get this image of this tank without like a white gloss line going through the photo. So usually you'll find me in the corner just cursing and swearing and the most foul language you can imagine. So I'm sort of tilting this thing at a sort of 70-degree angle and trying to hold my phone and just get that one image I need. Other archives, for example, Bovington, they do the same thing, £10 usually for the day camera license. But if you want pictures or photos that are already out there, big photos, they will, if they catch you, they will charge you £25. Scanning rates vary massively. Some places are really, really cheap to scan. Some charge you lots. By far the cheapest is the National Archives in London. They will go up to an A3 scan, will cost you about £2. Other ones will charge you £4 for an A4 scan, and it goes up dramatically after that. So again, if you want to scan something, know how much it's going to cost. They'll want money up front, and sometimes you might have to wait for up to 2 weeks for them to post it out to you. Or they'll do it digitally. But you still got a long time.
So moving a little bit away from that, onto the same topic of archive stuff, but something that I don't think has ever really been addressed. What is the process for sourcing that sort of information? Because I would assume a lot of authors probably don't, they probably just put where they got the information or something like that. So how would you say would be a good way to be able to like back up that information where people can verify it? Because otherwise you're kind of taking authors at face value. You have to kind of trust their honesty.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a difficult thing to do.
If you're a crappy copy and paste author, then they tend to just say, source on this book, you're like, and that's how you have to track it all the way back. Sometimes you have to go through like 5 or 6 or 7 different bloody authors to get back to the initial source. If you're doing archive stuff, then just put whatever, when you're doing your sources, whatever the name of the document is, and put the archive number, the session number that you'll find that document on. Otherwise, it's very easy to call bullshit. Now, when I was doing the Boarhound video, for example, one of the things that kept coming up on various online bits and even on some of the cheaper Nasta books was like, oh, the Boarhounds were serving in North Africa, as HQ division vehicles. And it's even on Wikipedia. If you look on Wikipedia, Boarhounds were somehow fighting in North Africa, which was quite amazing because they weren't delivered until North Africa had finished. And then under the source, he's got documents held at National Archives. That's it. What documents? And then the second source has got some made up words like, North African liaison, blah, blah, which again, if you search for, comes up with no finds whatsoever. So if you're going to put that in, you actually have to put what the archive document is. And all archive documents will have quite a large serial number. So for example, National Archives, it'll be like 00194, which gives you what type of file it is and where you can find it, and then the serial number afterwards. Bovington will have something like E2022, so the year that it was put onto the system, followed by the serial number that will come after it, which will generally be how many documents have been put on that year. Put those on, and then that you're telling somebody that reads your information, if you don't believe me, this is the document, here's where you can find it, at what archive, and so on. But if you don't put that source on, then you might as well be speaking out your ass. It's the most important thing you can do is say where your information's from and how you got it.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that sort of sourcing before, where it just says kind of at the end of the book where it says like images from archives or something like that without a specific source. And obviously with bigger books, you would have a lot of, you'd have just half the book would be sources of different places to find the information. But I definitely think that's something that some authors could do better about, is just finding where the important information comes from so that people can go back and verify the information in the books, because otherwise it can create a lot of problems down the road where it's like, okay, well, this author says that there were 150 of these vehicles made, but these other authors say that there were 151. Well, which is right? I can't check which source this guy used or the other ones. So was it 150? Was it 151? It doesn't really matter per se, but at the same time, it can make it hard to verify details like that.
So generally,
KV2 is
if you've got two bits like that, and you're going over it, and the source 1 and source 2 conflict and don't match up, and they don't give where it came from, then you can always safely say sources vary. That could be your get out clause. But still, it feels a bit of a dirty move because you're just repeating that information without sourcing it either.
Yeah, I've had to do that on numerous occasions. I'm just saying, like, it's something that maybe people should start to do in the future to kind of help curb this, sort of trying to think of ways that we can solve these issues going forward. Definitely online, I think, makes it easier because it's easier to have your sources all listed. You can put them on a separate page or something instead of having to print it all in the book. But it's definitely something that, going into the digital age and people being able to find all sorts of information online, buy all sorts of different books, it's important that we kind of get back to proper sourcing for a lot of stuff, or making things more available to people so that it's easy. Which is why I say,
if you don't know who the author is, I'd avoid the books.
Yeah.
Go to the original stuff. And while that's not possible, everyone. I mean, people say, "Oh, but I can't get to an archive. You know, I can't do this." Well, I can't perform an autopsy, and I shouldn't call myself a surgeon. You know, or if you can't do something, at the end of the day, it's a bit harsh to say, but you shouldn't try to keep doing something if you can't get that information to do it. You know.
Yeah. It's better to not know and not publish anything than it is to that's not know and post something and be completely wrong, which we're going to be talking about on Friday.
Yes,
because there was a very, very good example of a case of an individual who has the tendency to post things that are not legitimate because they don't have the original information. It's one of the reasons I haven't covered OI on my channel. There's some information regarding it, but I don't have any good documentation on it, and there's not a lot of stuff out there. So I don't want to put my reputation on the line with the information that we have on the OI. I'm sure it would make a decent enough video, but I'm not satisfied with the information that's out there right now. Plus, there's other videos you can watch on it that'll explain it pretty much as well as I can, because there's about 2 sentences worth of information on the vehicle.
I mean, that's absolutely spot on, because the one thing I sort of get asked that one is like, oh, you know, could you do this on this German tank, or could you just like on object something? I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Well, no, because unless that vehicle is in my archives, in a archive I visit, I'm not going to be able to do it, because any information I get would either have to be a book or reading something online, unless I get my ass over to Russia and go into a Russian archive, and I don't speak Russian, you know. So
yeah, that's an issue I've run into as well. I've wanted to cover things like, somebody in the chat was mentioning Object 279. I would love to cover Object 279. The trouble is, all the information on it is from books that are in Russian. I'd be fine with using the book since it's pretty much all that I can use, but I'm not satisfied because I can't translate it myself, and Google Translate is iffy for translating large documents. I need to get somebody that can translate them, but yeah, for my sort of videos, it would work, but I wouldn't go out and try to write my own book or anything on the stuff without the archival information. And there are people that go out there and find the stuff that can speak Russian. It's just tricky because a lot of the times that stuff is then posted again in Russian and it's not translated over to English. So there's definitely issues. I think there's some issues with that with the French archives. I would assume the Chinese and Japanese information, although Japanese stuff, there's more just no information to begin with, or it's all in a language people can't read. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into finding the information and what makes the information available to people. And yes, I know I need to clean up my shelf. The bottom thing, my Lego AT-AT fell over, and I haven't had the heart to fix it yet.
There was someone I saw in your chat who was like, what does it mean by British eyes only? Well, that's fairly self-explanatory. It's for British eyes only. I can't. But generally, when you sometimes you see things under classification, it'll say like eyes only, which means you'll have to have a certain level of secrecy, and they want you to be in the UK military, usually fairly high up. Then you'll sometimes see like UK, Canada, America, so they're happy for you to pass that to Canadian intelligence and Canadian high ups and Americans, but not the Germans and the French. Definitely not the French, because obviously you're passing over state secrets.
Yeah.
And one of the big ones that came up, for example, that was really interesting, was in Chobham armor. We sort of gave it to the Germans and we didn't really mean to, and they copy and pasted it, which was very naughty of the Germans. And then we accidentally leaked it to the Americans as well. And the Americans are fairly good with it, because we then turned around and said, right, you can have this armor, but you cannot, and you have to sign to this, you cannot reproduce it as your own armor. So the American stuff today, and I chatted with Rob Cogan at Fort Benning on this one. I remember asking a while back, I said, do they still call it Chobham? I was like, yes, they still call it Chobham armor if you push, because it is. They might have tweaked it a little bit here and there, but they don't try and claim it's an American thing. They do source it back to us. So once we did this, we then put on something called a moustache code, because we had this situation going, well, if you're a high-level intel guy and you know how Chobham's made, and you're talking to an American guy, or how do you identify his level of clearance and how much he knows, or would you potentially giving information away? So we put something moustache in which, in that conversation, when somebody's the initial greetings and say hello and they want to know about something, they have to drop the word moustache into it. Which sounds absolutely crazy, but if, say, this American officer came up to you wanting to know a little bit more about the armor, and then sort of said, "Oh, my moustache is itching a bit now," you'd sort of know that you could talk to him about the armor. It's absolutely batshit crazy when you think about it. But moustache codes, and there were some examples of how to introduce yourself to different intelligence officers on the same thing, and how best to fit the word moustache into a conversation to let them know that you're on the same level of talking about this armor classification.
That's definitely that's an interesting little.
Yeah, but again, that's the sort of stuff that you won't find anywhere else but other in an archive hidden away amongst all the files of random bollocks, It's right there.
That sounds like something you should cover for a video. That's just a very entertaining. The secret of the mustache code.
Absolutely, you should do that one, yeah. I'd have to get like some sort of artwork done for it, because there's obviously no photos of how to identify a man by his mustache.
Well, just get one of those. Just get one of those stick-on like those stick-on gigantic mustaches. I think you have a beard, right? So you might have to stick it on top of that. But you could do a little skit of it. Maybe if Beast comes up again, you and him can act it out.
I mean, there'd be like a paradox. Maybe like Joe Stalin would approach you in the 50s, but he's also got that big mustache. You'd be like, "Oh God, what do I do now?" Yeah, we'll get Beast to grow a moustache for this. It'll be brilliant. So there's some great finds, and one of the things that I actually love about the archives is sometimes you find documentation that hasn't been opened since it was initially sealed. It's still in its boxes. And there are 2 times I've been going over a lot of tortoise information recently and getting boxes on tortoise. And so we found some boxes that were in a place that you'd never think. I'm not going to tell people where it is, but you'd never think where tortoise would be.
Mm-hmm.
And in there were the original brochures for things like AT-13 and AT-7 and all the original Winston Churchill notes back and forth on tortoise, and they were completely sealed from the day they were put in there.
Wow.
And another one was up in Oxford at the college up there, Oxford University, and my friend Craig was there with me. And we were looking at it. It was mostly bollocks. We were looking for tank stuff, and there was lots of stuff on MD1 and all sorts of stuff. And the window, the foil tapes that they dropped out of bombers to confuse German radar.
Yeah.
Inside these files, he found several rolled up foil tapes still in their original coils that had been sent to someone for examination, and somehow they'd just been boxed up in about 1944 and never opened again.
Wow.
So when he opened it up, there were all these foil parcels and things. So those are lovely because, you know, when you find that information, you're reading stuff that hasn't been read in the last sort of almost sort of 70, 80 years. And you're the first person to read it out there since it was sealed up during the war. And that's great when you find that stuff. It's absolutely fantastic.
So moving away a bit from the archive stuff, because obviously that's something that a lot of people, I would say probably like 90 or greater percent of the community might not have access to. Either they don't live near them, or it's just not something they'll ever be able to get around to.
Well, you
But
can order orders. You can order stuff. So they're usually fairly cheap. They even do stuff for free sometimes. So if you go into a lot of archives and you put your stuff in, and you find a document, it'll say, "Do you wish to order this document?" It can be up to a 2-week wait, and you'll either get it done by an e-delivery or actual copies sent to you. So
okay.
you can order absolutely anything. The only problem is if it's a really big document, if it's like a 600-page file, then you can be looking at spending a lot of money.
Yeah.
Um, there's a particular guy on my Discord that every time I've been putting these videos out, he's been ordering the documents. He's like, I've spent like £3,000 in the last 4 months. I'm like, crazy fucker. So yeah, but if you want a particular document, do it. And some archives you can say, I only want pages 1, 8, or 10. If they,
Mhm.
you know, others will do the whole lot. Bovington, for example, you can say, oh, I want this particular thing. What do you have? And they'll usually break it down and say, oh, it's chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and so on, or this and that. And you can sort of pick and choose a little bit to save yourself some money. But yeah, providing you're not completely piss poor broke, you can order documents from archives anyway.
So how about for people that might not have the funds for that sort of thing? Because I have to grab it really quick, but I have, for example, well, it's in Russian, so I can't use it, but I have the actual one of the, I believe it's a handbook for the T-62 tank, and kind of, I'm curious, how often do you find, or how much information can you get from something like that? Maybe it be like one of the original operator's manuals for a vehicle or something of that sort, where you can maybe find it on eBay, or you could find it at like even a yard sale or something. How often do you find that something like that might be useful? Because I feel like that could be something that someone who maybe can't make it to the archive, doesn't understand the whole process, or maybe doesn't have the money, they could
I mean,
get something
absolutely.
like that.
I've combed
I'll grab that
eBay
real quick.
a hell of a lot in my use. I like to buy military brochures, tank ones. So sitting opposite me now, there's 20 large files that are full of brochures. So there's about 3,500 brochures just to my left over there at the moment, going right the way along one table and down the side of a wall, that I've been buying off eBay for the years. And you know, let's say you pay between £10 to £50, depending what the brochure is, and that will usually have something like the vehicle's dimensions, the layout, some pictures, the different equipment you can fit to it. You know, night sights, engines, and options like that. That's all good stuff. If you're doing a book or a document, that's all good stuff, because you can then turn around and source that as a legitimate source, because it is a brochure from the company that made it. Now, sometimes it's wrong. Sometimes you double check that they've got something wrong. But if they have got something wrong, the original company made a mistake, not you, because you can say that you use that source material from their thing. So yeah, again, here you've got a workbook, absolutely stuffed full of information that you can use if you can read Russian. You'll have generally dimensions, weights, how to fix the engine, layouts, plans, armor thicknesses. You can go for a hell of a lot on workbooks. Again, got quite a few of them down here. So they're absolutely brilliant. But what you won't find in workbooks is usually the background to the vehicle. Why did they make it? Who made it? Who switched over? How much it cost? Trials and developments. You won't find that stuff, but you will find just the core facts that you need. And again, workbooks are brilliant for finding that information on, because they're usually accurate to the finest millimeter.
There is a lot of some of them as well have been converted to ebooks and things like that. So these are things that are readily available. You can find them as PDFs. I believe I have, let me check. I believe I have on my PC, I actually have the handbook for the M6 heavy tank. So there's definitely, that is definitely an option.
Yep,
for somebody that might not have the ability to go and find the information from
There's
the
some
other
that are
sources we've been
really
talking
common
about.
now, like KV1 and things. On Scribd, if you got Scribd, you can basically just loot them off that. You get like, what was it, a 3 weeks trial or something. Just go on and help yourself and just download all you can. eBay, you can usually find workbooks, a lot of the Russian ones. You know, there's T54, 62, 72, and so on. I've seen T80 come up there before. Some of the harder ones to get, things like the very early T34s come up there, but they can be a lot of money. But yeah, expect to part with about £50 for a workbook.
Yeah, if anyone is interested in the Heavy Tank M6 and M6A1 original technical manual, you should use the link down below. Use one of my Amazon links, because then I'll make a little bit of commission off of that. But you can just search that up on Amazon, and I got it as an ebook for like $5 or $6 because I couldn't find it anywhere else. So I figured, hey, why not? I can double check some of the information on there. And yeah, it's let's see how many pages it is. You get yourself 169 pages worth of pictures, diagrams showing all different parts. You can learn how to start up the tank, how to tension the tracks, how to stop the engine, how to load the guns, how to sight the guns, pretty much everything that you could need to operate the tank. So it's very interesting information and can teach you a lot about the vehicles. So there's a lot of ways that you can find information like that that does not require the archives. So if you can't for some reason do that, there are other ways out there. But I would encourage you to do that, because it's way better than going on to wunderwaffe.com and reading off of some cum-stained napkin of a Hitler fanboy that wrote about the way that you launch a V3 missile and how it was the greatest thing that would have won the war for Germany. So yeah, you definitely pick your sources.
I mean, it's funny you mentioned Wunderwaffe, because it always makes me laugh. And you see, like, everything from like computer games upwards, they go, "Oh, but the level of the technology the Germans had was beyond anything we had." You know, Call of Duty sort of shit. You're like, no, it wasn't. See, here's the thing: when the soldiers were going through Germany, and they were discovering this plane or that tank or this gun, they're like, "Oh wow, boys, look at this! This is amazing." Because that's the soldiers then passed it, and they're sort of sharing that information and talking about it. But quite often, all this stuff was being developed at home or even before the Germans, but of course that was top secret. So the standard troopers on the ground never knew about it. So people are going, "Oh yeah, but the Germans were playing with swept-wing aircraft. So are we. They had jet engines. So did we. They had infrared. So did we." The point is, you found it now as soldiers on the ground. So of course soldiers do what all soldiers do, and they talk and gossip. But regularly back in American England, and even in the Russians, we were all working on this stuff. Oh, but the Germans had a guided bomb. So did we.
Oh yeah. Speaking of that, I believe, wasn't it the U.S. had basically a fully functional drone during World War II that they used in the Pacific, which is
the Americans had quite a few
ahead of the V1, that's for sure.
Yeah, and they had quite a few guided bombs and missiles. And but the Germans had like an air-to-air missile. So did we. This is the crazy shit. It's like when you start delving, you find all this information, you go through it all, you realize that all the nations pretty much mirrored and paralleled what everyone was working on. There was nothing there that caught us by surprise, really. The only thing I can probably think of was the V2, and the only reason it caught us by surprise is that Churchill was provided with information, initial pictures of it going there, and Lord Churchill went up to him, and I very much doubt that they could make a missile this big that could hit, London from there. And Churchill believed him. And when the first missile landed, I've actually got the memo from Churchill, which goes along the lines of, "Mind if I have a word in your ear?" Because he was a bit pissed off that this thing had landed after he'd just been reassured by a close friend that there's no way the Germans could be doing this. But generally, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that people go, "Oh, German Wunderwaffe," and it's like there's nothing wonderful or waffe about it. It's like everyone was working on this stuff. Remote controlled tanks. The Russians were ahead of this one by 10 years over everyone else. They were working on remote controlled T-62s and things. People go, "Oh, what about the Goliath bomb?" The French had that in World War One. They had their equivalent of. So there is nothing exciting or new once you start delving in deep. Which I suppose takes some of the mystery of things away.
So going back to what you've found specifically with your archive and stuff, I remember in one of the Chieftains videos, he mentioned that one of his favorite things he's ever found in the archives was his anti-tank rock that he's mentioned a couple times. What is the favorite thing of yours that you've found in the archives, whether it be something wacky like that or just something that you never expected to find?
Well, the two favorite things. The one that always gives me the happy joy feelings are when I find something that disproves the popular theorists or historians as they're being wrong. You know, like Covenant being good, or the Valiant not being a bad tank. But for exciting weird stuff, I think the MD1 archives are really interesting. So MD1 was Churchill's toy shop. These are the group of gentlemen that were to design all the weird and wonderful weapons to achieve unusual outcomes, you know, be it the sticky bomb, for example, was MD1, the Piat was MD1, but things like the puffballs, which were a small Hesh bomb, was MD1, bouncing mines that they dropped into the canal that would go up and down a canal until they hit a ship. And there were all sorts of weird ones, but some of the home guard, for example, explosive bowlers that you could throw out of a window at a passing German. A type of funnel that you put into a fire hydrant that fired out shattered and broken glass at passing Germans. So these are some of the weird and wonderful weapons. You wonder what sort of sadist just sits there and draws my ideas and going, right, so German man walks past, this dices his legs off. Brilliant. But they came up with all sorts of different devices to do this. And you look at some of the test reports, you know, sort of weird ways of getting petrol bombs onto targets. And it's just got like very brave crew or foolish written next to it. But yeah, so some of those are quite interesting. You're reading through them, like, who came up with this idea? One of them I got some photos of was the aerial bomb, for example. And I never knew the aerial mine. Sorry, I never knew that aerial mines were built and used to this extent. So what they were, and they're not the ones used on the blimps. These were dropped out the back of a plane. So you basically detect a German bomber formation coming in. You'd fly up in front of it by about 4,000 yards, and you'd drop this parachute out the back. And it had almost like a piano wire that went all the way down with these very small explosive devices down, a bit like a jellyfish sting. And then as the plane flew, it'd wrap around the plane's window and detonate. That's my door going. One moment.
All right. Let me just look at some chat while we wait for him to return. Mouseman, E100 was basically the slightly lighter perfect mouse. No. I've done a video on the E100. It was slightly lighter, that is true, but it was far from perfect. If anything, it was actually probably more flawed than the mouse because it used a lot of Tiger components. So in theory, more likely to be built, but in practice, it would probably not have been able to function very well because you're using already overweight, already heavily overstrained components for something that is even heavier than the other
Amazon
vehicle.
Randomly.
All right, so I think we have kind of covered most of the things that I can think of for digging into information. So I guess we can kind of open it up to questions from the chat. If you guys have anything specific that you would like to ask us regarding researching tanks and that sort of topic, or any other questions you might have. So we'll open it up to you, open the floor to the audience.
Yeah, go for it, yeah.
I don't think there's any that we've missed so far, really. So just gotta wait for somebody to throw something in there. Tyler Rose, I saw earlier. You were never taught sourcing in school outside of copy pasting into EasyBib. I mean, I would say as long as you're making your sources known, that's kind of all that matters. There are proper ways to do it, but a lot of the times all I'll do for mine is I'll link to the book I use and to the different sites I use, because as long as people can find their way to it, that's, I think, what's most important. There are proper ways to do it, and I probably don't do it right, but there are, as long as you're sourcing it, I think it's good. All right, here's one for you, Ed. How would you find the archive document serial number?
So generally, if you're using certain National Archives, I can have a quick look here for you. So you just go on to the National Archives. And here we go, National Archives. You click on that one. You have a few more later, and it'll be like search our records. We're going to go look at Tiger Tank. There we go. God knows I don't want to look for that one. There we go. German Panzer VI Tiger tank, and the reference 00194 1115, the slash in the middle. Preliminary report number 19. So if you put that into your thing and you have that, there you go. Now, if someone's just put some information up there and they haven't put an archival number, ask them. Now, when I'm doing my YouTube videos, sometimes you might have gone through like 30 or 40 different stuff, and you're doing YouTube, and people actually don't want a chat description half a mile long. So you can always say, if you really want to know more, feel free to PM me and I'll help you out.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to do that. If you're doing a book, you always put the references, you always put your source material in. If you're doing YouTube, generally you can say, information gathered at Bovington Archive Museum or Kew Museum and so on a day. Because again, it could be pages and pages and pages and pages of references.
And on that same topic, I don't know which archive website you were using, but the one that I was showing earlier with the American ones, I believe the way that you would do it is you just go over here to this advanced search, and then I believe this record group number / collection ID, that is probably where you would enter the number that you would get, and then it should bring you, as long as it's on the website, you would be able to find it, and if not, you would then probably be able to contact them and get access to it. So that would be the way that you would do that, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you just go in there and you put in the exact reference number and it'll find the information for you.
Okay, so Blitzkrieg 1940s. How good of the information source is Tank Encyclopedia? Not to throw them under the bus too much, because I do use their information a lot, and there's a lot of good people that work with them. But some of their articles are not the greatest, but that's mainly because they're still outdated and they're just basically copy pastes of Wikipedia. So the best way, let me pull up one. I know that the KV2 is a redheaded stepchild of their sources, but not that the information on it is completely bad, but if you scroll down to the bottom and you have a source link, a source page that looks like this, then you're probably not going to get the best information from it. But if you go on to something like let's do Tiger Tank Encyclopedia, and then you go scroll all the way down, and then you have a source. I mean, you could also tell by the length of the article itself, but now you've got a proper source list there. This you're definitely going to be able to rely on much better. So it's kind of hit or miss with them, but they are definitely, I would say, one of the best online sources that you can use.
With TE, it's a little bit down to the author as well. So when they first started, they had a Frenchman, David Boclet, who cares, he's French, and he was the guy that put the Wikipedia stuff more across and just copy pasted Wikipedia. These days, it's got some pretty good professional writers, and some of them are well-known authors in their own respect. Here we've got Andrew Hills, for example, on that Tiger one we're looking at. He's got quite a few good books out. I know Andrew Hills does some good research. He's Mr. Tog. Loves all things Tog. So I take him with pretty high levels of respect for stuff handy publishers. Some of the other stuff, not so much, but they tend to be older stuff that's now just kept in for SEO and search engine optimization.
Yeah.
But I know
the KV2 is an example of that. I've been told that directly.
Yeah, done by a guy called Will Kurz. Complete tit. Generally, though, Stan that's running it, he's a really good bloke, and he's getting very good at cutting out the dead wood from the writers. But obviously, this is it is an online thing. So you have a problem. You've got somebody that comes along and says, "Oh, I'm an expert in this, and I do all this, and I've written this and this and that." It can take you a little bit of a while before you realize they're talking a lot of bollocks,
Yeah,
and when they start putting articles up, you go, "Well, wait a minute, this just doesn't tally up with what's known,"
If you do happen to run into something like that, be sure to toss. They have a Discord that you can join, and you can mention it in. They have a specific chat. I don't remember the name of it, but you can mention the inconsistencies in it. I did that with one of their articles, and I was able to get a couple things corrected, which were not super glaring issues, but they were definitely not correct. I believe it was the Panzer IIJ article, which they still referred to it as being in the Battle of Kursk, which, to my knowledge, there's no evidence of that. It might be something slightly different, but it was along that line. All right, here's a good one for you, Ed. I'm not really sure about this one, but you might have run into it. Does the training of the crews affect the research and development of new tanks? That's a very interesting question.
Yeah, absolutely does. So when you're working on designing a new vehicle, you need to make sure that the crew can train and operate on it and learn on it. Now, sometimes you get a training vehicle instead, and sometimes you get training software. And with certain tanks, you usually actually end up with an entire array of software, both like simulation machines, as well as sort of the visual side of stuff that they do. So yeah, it does. Generally, you need to make sure that your crews can train on it easily and learn on it easily. Otherwise, it's a bit of a pointless machine. But normally, what you call it human factors, that they can also access stuff they need to access, engines. They need to be able to get to all the parts they need to be able to get to. They need to be able to get in and out of it easily. But as well as operating it, being able to train on it is an important aspect.
Oh, Grunkle Hats, you're going to give me a brain aneurysm. Please never refer to that vehicle as the Object 122. I have made a video on the WZ or Project 122 in the past. The name that Gaijin has given that vehicle in game is so far from correct, I don't even know where to start with it. But yes, if you go scroll back in my videos, it should be When East Meets West, and it is on the WZ 122 TM and the other vehicles in that program. Very interesting vehicle, but I hate Gaijin for getting the name wrong. I'm pretty sure they just pulled some Russian source and threw object on there, because object is not a Chinese term, to my knowledge. Not 100% sure if you have an answer to this one, but from Lord Captain Teapot, what would you recommend to do if an archive had a document, but it was a short description of it due to them not having the original themselves? Contact for author info or who may have it. That seems like a fairly rare situation, but
yeah, it is rare,
could
but it
happen.
does happen. Sometimes you just find partial information. It can be tricky because quite often with older documents, it doesn't tell you who it came from or how they got the information on the provenance of that document. So a lot of documents delivered to archives came from people that usually worked at the tank plants or were directors or were staff, and they handed stuff over. Sometimes, their children handed stuff over when they died and passed on. They found a whole lot of stuff in dad's attic, off it went. But when you're reading a description of a document, it doesn't tell you who, when, or where. So sometimes you'll just get, oh, please see following documentation, or please see attached files or folders, and there's nothing there. One thing I was saying to Cone earlier that will drive most people mad eventually in archives is the Ministry of City Attachments, as we called it, because you'll see a whole load of documents you go through and you'll be like, oh yes, this is it, oh yeah, tortoise, please see attached 10 photos, turn the page, there's no photos. There might be the rusty mark where a staple there once was, but there's no photos. Or please see attached blueprints, no blueprints. Or please see attached, anything. They're always missing. At some point, somebody went through the Ministry of City Attachments and just took off everything useful you'd ever want, ever. So you'll often find that when you're going through, you'll find sometimes a cover note, like, oh, please find the following description of everything to do with this tank that we did on, and that'll be it, the single page in a file. The rest of it's missing. There's no point in going and asking the staff in the archive because you're just going to get a blank look like we know. It's gone. So all you can generally do is try to search for more information on that one. If you've got somebody's name at the top, go down there. But yeah, stuff has gone. And unfortunately, the other nasty truth is that archives do have a limited space. And in the past, certain archivists, Bovington, have thrown vast amounts of information away. Thousands and thousands of pages of information has been binned because it either wasn't interesting to the head archivist, wasn't relevant to them and their museum, or they just couldn't keep it, so they just cleaned it out. And even today, stuff still gets binned, unfortunately. So quite often you'll find big gaps. Now, I one of the series I cover is the School of Tank Technology projects a fair bit, and some of them have been kept, some of them have gone. Either the model's gone, the blueprints are gone, the plans are gone. One of the vehicles, for example, Chimera in World of Tanks, the Tier 8 Heavy, they they had about 300 pages of text, and in the description, over 800 drawings were done, but they were binned
Ugh.
because they took up space. And
Yeah.
they considered, well, we've got the written bit. Nobody's interested in this Cold War junk, not when they can learn about Tiger. So they just binned all the drawings. I mean, this isn't recent. We are going back now.
Yeah.
But the point is, stuff was binned.
It's unfortunate that there isn't a way where they can at least like give a time period where it's available, where like, oh hey, we don't have room for this, and this isn't anything that we want to keep, and they can't just basically let people come and kind of like just take it. Because it'd be better at least if it got into the hands of people who can either digitize it or something, instead of just throwing it in the trash or shredding it.
Yeah,
very unfortunate.
A lot of stuff has been destroyed. Other archives have closed down, and the information's been lost. So there was a large one which was a sort of military repository of information where they reclassified everything. So everything went to this one central depot, went through a reclassification process, and then it went out to either relative parties or academics in the area. When that department closed, they just binned everything. We're talking skip after skip after skip of information was just burnt and binned at the back, just burnt. When I was at the Remy Museum, I found a lot of the wooden models that were basically covered in dust at the back. And these were a lot of the future main battle tank designs. They're the only wooden models. And I got talking to the curator at the time. He's dead now. As it happened, he was underneath a tank smoking a cigarette and welding it as he was working under it. Fantastic chap. And he came out and we got talking about these wooden models. And he said, because he didn't know anything about them because he was Remy. But he said that when they'd taken over the site, a CEO, a new commanding officer, come in, found all these models and put them a whole lot in a skip and started burning them. And he goes, I managed to get these ones off the top, but he goes, there's about 4 foot of ash underneath them.
Oh.
So it lets you know how much was destroyed just to save the 12 they have. And it happens a lot. It happens an awful lot of stuff that gets destroyed. So I'd say it might sound like you have a lot in an archive, but I reckon you've probably only got about 10% of anything that was ever done is left.
Yeah, which is crazy considering how much information is still out there that hasn't been found, and with all of it that's been lost, it's just, yeah.
Yep. And some people that you're looking for, that were important people in the field. Leslie Little, for example, he was the chief engineer for Vickers, did the Valentine and everything else. None of his documents remain. There's Vickers stuff, but somewhere out there should be all of Leslie Little's papers and correspondence. Nothing. And the one that surprises most people is Centurion. People think they know about early Centurion. Well, you've got the pictures of the initial prototype that was in sort of late 1944-45 period. Before that, where are the wooden models going back to? Because Centurion actually goes back to 1942. 42 is the very earliest reference, but 43 is the general start date. There should be all the different plans, the different wooden models, the different test drives. There's the Centurions with the bow machine guns. We've got all the reports of them firing the bow machine guns. There's no pictures. So there's all of Centurion between early 1943 to 44 is missing. It could be out in somebody's attic.
Yeah.
Even when I was at the Tank Museum, I remember saying, looking in the records, and it had an Orange William missile, which was fascinating because it was basically the super heavy missile that we designed for anti-tank work. And I'd gone out the back, and it wasn't there. And I said to the girl that was working, the sort of deputy head of the collection, I went, where's the Orange William missile gone? And she's like, oh, it's just around the corner. It's in the collection. It's not. So she gave me that sort of, withering look. She got the keys and went out the back, and she sort of stomped, put her foot down, stomp, square the shoulders, and she pointed and went, it's there. And I went, that's not Orange William. And she went, what makes you so sure? And I said, 1, I took my tape measure out, I went, shorter. 2, thinner. I said 3. I turned it around and said, it's got Malcara written down the side of it. It's like a bit of a giveaway. It's not Orange William. And so things have gone, even from archives. So the Orange William missile's gone. The L4, the 183 millimeter round for the L4 gun, it's on the books, but it's missing. At some point in the last 40 years, it's just vanished out of an archive and gone. So
I guess although that is kind of a bit of a black pill, as they might call it, there is the upside that nowadays things are it's a good and bad thing that things have moved more towards digital, because now we have the space to hold all the stuff, and it's not necessarily going to get burned or binned because it's not taking up infinite amounts of space. But you also have the fragility of that system where it can be lost more easily in some ways. But it is good that you have people going in, getting the information from the older stuff, digitizing it so that it can be preserved in case it does get thrown away in the future.
Well, I think sometimes it's not been digitalized very well.
Yeah.
So I was up at Cambridge. Now, Cambridge is a fantastic archive to go into, Cambridge University. It's a beautiful old Art Deco building. It's quite amazing. And there's a whole load of Vickers stuff. So I'd actually gone looking for Vickers tanks, obviously, and they came out, and I got this 2 trolleys of enormous rolls, which are rolled blueprints, came out, and they were all the Vickers railway guns. Unbelievable amounts of railway guns the Vickers were working on, huge numbers. But these rolls were knackered. They were done on that weird canvasy fiber material, which is like cracking and breaking all over the place. And where they'd just been rolled up in big bundles of, say, 50 to 60 drawings at a time, they weigh an absolute fortune, and they just get thumped off and dropped and so on. The edges are all frayed and torn and broken. So they were bad. And there were all these photo albums that were done by Vickers at the time with all their railway guns on these almost like A3 size photos.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all silvering. So where they use silver nitrate, after a period of time, the photos get almost like a silver finish, and it starts on the edges and makes its way in. And eventually the photo will become completely unusable. It'll just look like a piece of silver metallic paper. The image will be gone forever. And so I went up, and obviously I told the head archivist, and she was there, and I said, look, these are starting to silver on the edges. They're about an inch on the edges and now silvered. I said, you've got a decade tops, and these images are gone.
Yeah.
And they look at you like, well, yeah. I don't think many people will look at this stuff and like, I don't give a fuck if many people don't look at it. This is the last record you have of this stuff. When it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah.
At least send it to get a digital copy, so that because you can't stop silvering. Once it starts, it's that's it. So sometimes people are really interesting. And again, I had another one at National Archives. I took out this plan, and it had been folded incorrectly. And if you keep folding big blueprints, eventually they sort of become frail along the folds, and they tear and they fall apart. And I remember taking it up to this person that was working on their desk. He was some summer intern, and he looked like the most lazy teen bastard I could have found. Sort of this nonchalant look of like, and I basically pointed out, I said, if this isn't unfolded and stored correctly, it's going to fall apart. I mean, it's literally coming apart at the seams. And he just shrugged his shoulders. And it's like, because at the end of the day, he's there for a summer job,
Yeah.
He didn't give a shit. What as long as he's getting his money at the end of the day, what does he care? So some of that drives you absolutely mad, because you know that this thing is going to eventually just collapse into like 16 different pieces and then probably get dropped or binned or thrown out.
Yeah.
But you can't save it all. And I've seen other museums. I've been in other museums where people have come in. I'm not going to say who they are, the museum, and people have come in with a big photo album of their like granddad's life in the tanks in Africa or wherever else, and that they'll all be shaking hands. Oh, very nice, thank you. This means so much to us. And as soon as they've gone, they've taken out 4 or 5 images of the tanks, and the rest of the album goes straight in the bin.
Yep.
Because it's space they don't need. And you're like, why don't you just take out the 8 photos and give them back their album? They probably think this album is going to last forever in an archive. You've just binned it. So stuff like that, I just makes my stomach turn, because I'm like, okay, I get that we don't need lots of pictures of him and his mate on the steps of the barracks and him and his mate dancing with the dance hall and things. Give those back.
Yeah.
Take the tank stuff, give that back, because that's all that's left of her dad. So I find that stuff despicable, and I stuck my neck out quite a few times and said, don't do that, and I got nothing but like, shut the fuck up, this is how it's done. So
so that it kind of goes, I guess if you were considering donating something like that to an archive, maybe make sure that the archive that you're giving it to has a good reputation for that sort of thing, if you want it preserved, or at least digitize it before you go and give it to anyone.
Definitely digitalize it.
You should do that with all older documents. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of places out there that will do it. You send your stuff in and they'll digitize old footage and everything for you. I don't have too much of the stuff myself, but I don't think they charge you a whole bunch for it, and you can send it in. And sometimes they'll be destructive if it's a book or something, but other times they can do it non-destructively for it's like a couple cents per page or something. So if you have a lot of old pictures and stuff like that, do that first before you go and give it to anyone, because once it's out of your hands, you never know what could happen to it.
Yeah. I mean, someone here, video killer, typically costs are involved in saving documents. Too true. I mean, even scanning stuff in, but generally, if you preserve it, you want it laid out flat. So you need one of the big flat preservation drawers or shelves. You need a Melanex sheet that size, and they're not cheap. They're about £16 a sheet. And and if you've got a lot of documents, you can imagine how quickly this builds up.
Yeah.
But the big problem is it's always space. But what the archives don't like doing is if they go, oh God, I've got no space for these railway gun plans. What they should do is then contact, say, Fort Nelson at Portsmouth and say, like, we have Vickers railway guns because we do Vickers. You are the Royal Artillery Museum and you have a railway gun. Would you like to have these railway gun plans, even on long-term loan, because we haven't got the space for them, on the condition that you look after them? That's the arrangement that should go on. But quite often archives won't share stuff because then that's taking away the potential collection they have. So they'll just have things getting moth-bitten at the back.
I think that might have answered someone. I saw somebody, I couldn't quite fully understand what their question was, but it seemed like they were asking about the sort of process of transferring between archives.
Archives like to hoard.
Yeah.
They like to hoard stuff. They don't like, and like any hoarders, they don't look after stuff sometimes. Some do, some don't. I'm not saying all archives are the same. Some don't look after stuff very well. But they won't give that stuff away to somebody that can look after it because somehow that's part of their little hoarded collection.
Here's another question. Somebody's asking, are there any number of private archives that people can't usually access? Yeah,
there are private people archives, but then it's not really an archive because an archive, by its definition, is accessible. It's something you can get to. So there are private collections, and sometimes you see people putting there something like so and so's personal collection at the bottom of a photo. There are private collections. There are private collections of tanks that I know of that are absolutely huge, and people have just got them as a long-term investment. But generally, holding on to information. This is sometimes you see stuff that goes on eBay. Now, I rarely splash more than £50. I'm a bit of and that's very rare. I'm a bit of a skinflint. I think the most I spent on a document was £100 for some prodigal stuff. But you do see albums of tanks that come up. I remember the Valiant workbook came up for that vehicle, and I think I put a flutter on for like £30. The next day, it'd gone for £800 or £900.
Whew. Yeah.
And then it's gone. It's in the hands of some private collector.
Well, speaking of, let me see if I can grab the thing that I have. You can keep talking about that. I'll just grab a couple of the older document things I have.
Yeah, those are quite awkward. When something that you think, God, that should be out there and get shared, disappears. So I keep an eye out. Now, a while back, there was, this great big folder came up, and it was all the stuff to do with Ontos development and lots of different types of Ontos layouts, from different companies and different manufacturers, all developing the same rough idea. And I was able to get hold of Fort Benning and say, oh my God, look, this is here. They then got hold of the contact seller on eBay, and I think they got $250 for the thing, and that's now gone to a good home. It's in somewhere, it will be preserved and looked after. But sometimes stuff doesn't, and it's gone for good then. Yeah. There's a little conversation here about mouses and miskies. What if you made a tank with a 240mm gun that wasn't a self-propelled gun, or would that just be useless or not needed? Well, caliber's not that important, really. So velocity is king. I mean, if it was just caliber, you'd use the same guns used in the Napoleonic period. Just having larger caliber, unless you're just lobbing high explosive, isn't really that handy. Basically, there's 1.5 mouses made. The second didn't have a proper turret.
I'm about as organized as a proper archive. Somewhere around here, I have one of the press images of the M6, but I don't know where it is at the moment. But speaking of things that you can pick up on eBay, I don't know how legitimate this is, but this is the it was release specifications for the Electra 10A, which was a proposal for a bomber using
Wasn't this the
one of
one I
the...
found for you on eBay and
Yes,
sent
you
over to
did.
you?
I
Yes.
managed to snag it. It was like 200 euros or something ridiculous, but I was like, you know what? I'm not going to let it pass up because there are some pretty neat things in here, including a full-size blueprint of the aircraft. So, if I ever get around to doing aircraft, I'll have it. But yeah, if anybody ever wants this for something, just let me know and I can get you some pictures of all the pages. And it's quite a large blueprint, so I'm not going to unfold it right now. But yeah,
Those are lovely. When you find them all intact like this, they're absolutely marvelous to get your
I
hands
have to
on.
check and see because there's some weird stuff on here. Like instead of it saying Lockheed here, it's LCC Heed. So I don't know. That could just be a typo. But yeah, there is a little bit of weirdness with it. But I don't see why it would be a fake or anything.
No, it won't be. It won't be a fake. I remember seeing the original stuff and knowing it's a genuine one. There's a couple that you should really watch out for. The TM manuals that come up. There's a lot of fake ones of those online. Yeah. You get an idea of what's fake and what's not. There is some fake around it.
Yeah, there's some weird typos and stuff in this, and
Certainly some of the photos and things.
how the blueprint flips is a little bit off of how it should, but I don't know. It could just be that that's how it was drawn back then. But yeah, I mean, all the information seems to check out. I haven't really compared it to anything, but yeah, 1935 document right there that it was in Italy, I believe. So I need to at some point digitize that so that it is safe. But yeah, you can still find stuff like that out there.
Yep. No, they do come up, and I keep an eye. Like I said, I've got various friends that I know collect. My good friend Lauren has more military manuals than the Tank Museum does, and has spent a small fortune in the past on certain vehicles. So if I see one of those that comes up in its original presentation case, I always give her a heads up. Usually, she's actually got a copy, but they're a good investment, especially tank workbooks, World War II ones. The German crap, obviously Nazi crap, always sells a lot more. But if you can get some of the World War II stuff and it's in good condition, just put it aside. Make sure it's well looked after and it's not in too much humidity. Stick it aside because it will only ever gain in value.
Yeah, some of the stuff you can find too if you go on eBay. I mean, you obviously have to be careful because some of the stuff could just be rescans, but you can find tons and tons of different old press images. Like I was saying, the M6 image, I found that on eBay. I got it for like, I think $6 plus shipping. So you can get things for quite cheap that you can then preserve because who knows who else it could go to if somebody else ends up buying it. You never know. But if you're going to be able to take good care of it and post the image online, although a lot of the images you'll find have already been posted online, but hey, having the original image or one of the original images definitely does not hurt. Let's see what we can find. I'll look on eBay. Historical photographs. Let's see what we can find. Actually, let's just do World War II. Oh, that is a terrifying image. Thank you for that, eBay. I don't think I'm going to sleep tonight. A lot of the stuff is more things that are made to look old, but yeah. Oh, here we go. Right here we've got this is obviously being in a bid right now, but let's pull up the screen. You've got named World War II photo album of the 386th Bomb Group. So, bunch of things of maybe not super historical value for most people, but I mean, it is still pieces and parts of history that can be preserved. And like Ed was saying, this is something that could very easily get binned because, oh, well, let's just grab the picture off the cover and then all the rest of these, whatever, they're just a bunch of soldiers.
And they will. In fact, sometimes you see these albums that have already nicked the good pictures out and what's left is the tat they haven't stolen. Hilary Doyle goes absolutely mental when you see the Panzer ones because they just take out a few good Panzer stuff and they throw the rest away. Like, oh yeah, the picture of the Panther and the picture of that in the bin. Then you've lost all your provenance. You've lost your crew. You've lost where the pictures were taken. You've lost which battle or which year. You've lost everything. And I think the worst case I've seen was at the Imperial War Museum. I went up with a friend and we started going through some tank boxes, and they had all the German tank files inside the boxes. You know, they had British, American. And when I opened up the box, I knew something was wrong straight away because everything was loose and scattered inside the box. And so rather than sitting there taking photos, I actually started archiving because that's what I do. And I started having to go through and put all the British tanks back in their files and go, for fuck's sake, here we go. And there's the Americans. And I got to the German ones and they were empty. I thought, oh no. And so all the German envelopes, no tanks inside. And so somebody's actually gone into that archive and just helped themselves to all the German armor pictures and just stolen them, put them in a laptop bag and so on. And the Imperial War Museum is nowhere near as well sorted out as, say, National Archives. No transparent bag, you know, you can take laptop bags in, so you can just stick it on a laptop bag and so on. And I went up to this little old deer who looked like she was hanging on by a thread to the mortal coil. And I basically pointed out what's gone on. I said, look, I've put your British folders thing here, sort all this out. And I said, someone's had all your German photos. And she looked at me and went, why would people do that then? I was like, because they'll stick them on eBay for £200-300 each.
Yep.
People will pay £1,200 for a picture of a panther on eBay.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy.
So if you've got an entire envelope with maybe 100 photos of German tigers and panthers and king tigers in there, you've made an absolute fortune. So people do steal from archives, and unfortunately, somebody cleared out that particular folder, and they probably knew what they're doing. They probably came in there, put the whole lot into something like a laptop bag, and walked out half an hour later, and they're going to make a fortune. The other one was, of course, the Italian museum got badly done over, and somebody stole all of their workbooks, all of their tanks, and then later on they started appearing on eBay, like, you know, all the Italian vehicles on CD. And if you actually,
I found an
if you look at
example
them,
of
they've actually
something
got
to
the
watch out
stamp
for.
on the back. They got a stamp on the back of all the photos saying belonging to this museum on these CDs that somebody private selling, because he just stole the whole lot from an Italian museum.
These are the sort of things you want to look out for when you're buying on eBay. German UFO technology, World War II. Yeah, okay.
Never buy medals on eBay.
Also, look out when you go down here because it's a type new print, so it's not actually an original. It's a reproduction. Yep. So you're paying for a reproduction image.
I think my favorite one, I can't find it. I wish I had it. It was apparently a
German to get my stream taken down.
German ceremonial coin that was of a king tiger in 1942. I was like, right, okay, seems legit. So yeah, there's absolute trash on eBay. Huge amount of money.
But you can find good stuff on there too. You just have to. It's a good sign when they have both sides of the image and there's a caption on the back, which is what my M6 one has. If you have something like that, there's a pretty good chance that it's a legitimate image.
Yep. Lots of fake tank stamps. They're quite funny. Some of them even got pictures of World of Tanks vehicles on them, claiming to be a legitimate tank stamp. So yeah, don't touch those.
Little. I know I saw a bunch of those little coin things. They had a bunch of little coins that were of different vehicles, and I could not figure out what the origin of them was. Let me see if I can find them. Tank coins. Well, here's an example of one. This could be that could be a legitimate one. Not the one I'm looking for. They were all like Russian tanks. I'm definitely not gonna be able to find them now, even though that's all I could find before. Let's see. Russian tank coins, maybe?
Oh, I found this one. I'll send this to you, Cone.
Here's an example of one. Ones like this. I have not been able to track down what the origin of these things is. I can find them for sale. Like, it seems like there's different ones of them. There's like some that look older and then some that are like newer production. It's very weird. I don't know if these were ever like a thing or if they're just like a new reproduction thing. I haven't been able to find any information on them. Because there's ones like T-44, there's some that are like IS-7, T-34-85. It's very, very strange. Oh yeah, here's Object 140. Like, why would they make a coin out of the Object 140? It doesn't make any sense.
Oh. There you go, Cone. I've just put this one over to you on Discord that you can share. This is one of my favorite dubious tank stamps. I don't know if you can share that with people.
But yeah, I should be able to.
Check this
There you
out
go.
for some legitimate tank stamping.
Yes, Type 59,
It
of
have you
course.
got it? Can you put it on your? Can you
Yeah,
put
it's
it up
up on the screen.
All right.
Very real. Very real.
Yeah, I absolutely love this one. It's like brilliant, so authentic, much real.
But yeah, I even asked the chieftain about those coins, and he said that at least to his knowledge, it wasn't anything to do with World of Tanks. So it might have been something from like the Kubinka gift shop, but I
I love the fact
couldn't
that
find
this
any
stamp
answer on
on
that.
the screen is actually overextending the actual stamp mark and everything else as well. That's the it's just World of Tanks. Yeah, there's all sorts of dodgy ones. Like I said, I've seen a coin with a King Tiger that had 1942 on it. I was like, okay.
There's
Take it with
a
pinch of salt.
thing on this page. Oh dang it, I lost it. Let me look up the tank coins again. The top one was, oh yeah, here it is. It's a German, well, quote unquote German 1943 Panther coin. Let's bring that up. There, yep. For $6. 2 available. Yeah. Okay. Guessing it's, does it at least say it's reproduction down here? Yeah, brand new, unused, undamaged, handmade. Must be, yeah, reproduction. Well, at least they say it, but sometimes they won't, so you do have to be careful.
Yep. The other ones that crop up are things like the Michael Whitman photograph on eBay with authentic original thing. It's the same photo that you can find like 1,000 times on Google. And sometimes you can see where somebody's gone, I've got Photoshop and I've put on a sepia tinge original. Also seen some very funny autographs. Michael Whitman autograph in 1946. So that's fucking amazing. How did they from beyond the grave? But you know, people know that the booze will buy anything. But yeah, it's like, you know, trying to charge £7 for that photo of Whitman on his barrel. It's like, you do realize that's literally on every. Just Google Whitman, you'll find it. But yeah.
Let's see. Any other questions? Yeah, it is good that a lot of images were duplicated, but it's we're just saying that it's important to preserve the stuff if you have it. Like if it's something that you have, if you want to give it to an archive, it's not a terrible idea, but just make sure that you digitize it first or make copies or something.
Yeah. I mean, I know archive stuff. My biggest regret is I gave away my vintage tank game collection to the archives to Bovington. So I had about 30 computer games that had gone all the way back to like Conqueror on the Amiga and things in Atari.
Oh.
And I gave them all to them because they wanted to do a tanks in popular culture display at one point. You know, how tanks have gone into games and models and figurines and you know, Action Man and everything else. So I handed all of that stuff over to them. And then when they did the display, it was like 6 items in a box. Shit. And now I always sit there and worry that one day at Tank Fest, somebody will come in and go, oh my God, look at all these big box games going back to like 1982 of tanks, you know, like £1 each. And that's my dread. That, you know, my half a lifetime of collecting will just be given away. And
it is unfortunate.
Yeah.
A lot of those games are niche too, so they haven't been put online in any way.
No. I mean, the world's most expensive game out there is a tank game. It's the one they only made one copy of, and it's a Matilda fighting flying saucers.
Huh.
I really want a copy of that. There's only one. I think they stuck it up on like $500,000 once just to see if anyone would buy it. Nobody did.
It's unfortunate that nobody is. Well, I guess the guy doesn't want to digitize it because, you know, he wants the money, but.
Yeah. But yeah, there's some really, really rare ones. But I mean, Conqueror was absolutely a fantastic game when it came out. I had all sort of like the M1A1 tank platoons and all of those, and some of the big boxes you just can't get for love of the money. And I spent ages getting like the mint big box and no creases or damage, and I gave the whole lot to the tank museum. It's like, no.
Yeah, really that's kind of my.
Display.
I have behind me, and you can't really see it because it's in a box on the floor, but I have an inert training round of 125 millimeter Russian tank shell, and it's like. It's very cool. I don't have any use for it. It's just cool, so I got it. But I'm going to do a video on it eventually. But I'd like to sort of give it to a museum, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know what they're going to do with it. They could just take it and stuff it in the back in their storage somewhere, and then what good is it? Like, if I want to give it, I want to make sure that they're going to use it for something. Otherwise, I'll just keep it, and stuff it somewhere.
Could
But
just
yeah,
sell it.
or sell it. Yeah, no, I want it. It's cool.
I mean, some stuff they sell, like, some stuff they sell is legitimate. You get duplicates of stuff. For example,
Yeah.
you might have 2 or 3 copies of a brochure. You don't need 2 or 3 copies. So one thing I used to do is go through, and when I was doing the Vickers stuff, you'd be like, oh, the Vickers Mark 3N, it's like 6 copies of the brochure. So I picked the best one out, and the second best, those we keep. And the other ones would go into a box that would go for sale at Tankfest, because we don't need 8 copies of the same brochure. But I still had to go through each one to make sure there was no differences.
Mm-hmm.
If there was a single letter or word different, we kept the next one up, and so we had to mark up why it was different. So yeah, a lot of it when I was putting stuff on was you go through the workbooks and you'd have to go through every page. You look for any differences, pencil marks, annotations, stuff like that, anything that was important essentially. And that's where we found some really interesting things. So, for example, the Vickers Mark IV turret and things. We built that vehicle. Vickers charged the MOD. They got the workbook for it. They then sent a copy down to South America for the Osorio. And all they did was they took the workbook and literally reshuffled the pages. And then they charged South America again for a new workbook. But it's the same workbook. They just reshuffled the pages.
Yeah, sounds about right.
That was Vickers. They were devious in every possible way it is to be devious. Then, when it came back to the UK, they reshuffled it again and sold it off as the Mark 7 turret. So you've actually got 3 workbooks, and these things cost thousands of pounds per book. And it's the same one, they've just reshuffled it twice. And then just put a new title on it. It's like, you cheeky bastards. But, of course, you don't find that until you start going through it. And there's only when I was reading through it, I was like, I've seen these pages before. I've seen this information. And you go back into where you filed the last yesterday's, and you go, take it off the shelf again. You start looking through it and going, yep, I see what they've done. Sneaky.
I'll answer your question, Chris. Let me just go and get it out of the crate, but it's both pieces. 1 second. I gotta stand up to get that thing out because it weighs a lot.
Okay, I'll let you do this while I use the bathroom.
Crate. Oh. Remember to lift with your legs and not your back, because this thing weighs a lot. I think the whole crate weighs like 140 pounds. I can barely lift it. Oh, there you go. Oof. I believe what it says it says on one side. Oh yeah. There, of course, it's the other. Oh gosh, my hands are a little sweaty.
Oh, this is your big chunky
It says like
shell.
right there, I believe it says inert. Let me go put this thing back.
It's a pretty good shell, man. I'm impressed.
Yeah, some of those things are not the easiest to find, so I saw that on an auction and was not going to let that get away from me.
I saw a Malkara missile a while back on for about £600, and I so wanted that. I thought, amazing. It's like, it's a 6-foot missile Malkara, and it could go along the end of my bed and secure that I basically never have sex ever again.
You just lay it next to you in the bed, and then you can hold it at night.
That's it, I like to think that most women would come home, see that, and be thoroughly fucking impressed, but I don't think that's how they work.
Thanks for the $5, High Safe.
Actually, there is one thing I was thinking of doing recently that some of your Conley fans might be interested in. So, as you know, I've been going up to these ranges recently, up in Scotland to take pictures of all the different tanks up in the ranges there and make a video out of them. And I want to actually go back up next year and take a small walking group around so they can actually go and look at all these vehicles and go on side Tortoise and everything else that's up there.
Mhm.
But two, I'm also thinking about doing actually filming a documentary about the range and the wildlife on the range. So it's the tanks and the wildlife and how they work together.
Yeah.
So if you have anybody that's a budding film fan, one of your fans, and actually doing it properly rather than just telling it with dad's VHS recorder sort of thing, actually knows what he's doing. That might be something I want to do next year, is actually go up and film it properly, and spend 2 or 3 days up on the range doing it correctly and filming it, and film the wildlife and film the tanks themselves and how they all work together. But yeah, let me know if you've got anybody that thinks that that's something they're capable of doing.
Yeah, I'm sure someone would definitely be interested in that if you can find the right person. And I was thinking the same thing there, Rat King. Armored Archive body pillow just shaped as the Malkara. There you go. That's your merch option.
Oh, mate,
Go ahead and get that in. Get that in production.
The Malkara body pillow. What kind of military games or in life is your favorite and grabs your attention the most? I still play Doom, and make Doom maps, the original Doom. So that's me.
I don't actually play as many games as I used to now. Mainly games similar to War Thunder are the ones that I like because they're so tank related. But IRL stuff, pretty much anything to do with tanks, especially if it's something where I can get a look at the tank without having to maneuver around 50 people and an entire display case of different things. It's nice to be able to see them outside and get a full view of them. That is definitely my favorite thing that grabs my attention the most.
I need you to introduce you to the best tank game ever made, don't I, at some point? Let me see if I can find it. I've got it on Steam. It's free to play, and you can abuse it to like levels of abuse that's just beyond anything you can imagine. It's the same people that do published my.com that do Armored Warfare. So they're the publisher, and essentially you can put money in it, but you shouldn't, and you should never go past tier 1 ever. Just use the tier 1 tank, and when you max it out, you can take on any other vehicle in the game and win, including the top tier tanks. I've played games where the score's been 80 kills in my name, because you just keep going until basically once it lets you play for like 10 minutes, and then you've got to put on the equivalent of like 30p. But at that point, you want like 50 kills, and you're just running around. But you're only doing it in a tier 1 tank. Do not ever progress up the thing and just put all the XP into one vehicle, and it just keeps exponentially growing.
Which game
until
is
people
this?
are dropping in at like level 6 with their Merkavas, and you're taking them out in your BMP1 as you just run past at 110 miles an hour.
What's the name of this game?
Let me find it. It's so abusive and badly written that it becomes brilliant. It's called Tank Force. I will send you the link to it.
I see it.
It's horrifically broken and therefore brilliant. And you've got things like you can pick up crates that drop these like landmine things, and these landmines basically blow up like an entire screen when they go off. So you get all these like retards in Merkavas that drop them. They can't actually escape because they're too slow. But of course, you're doing 110 miles an hour, so you just run past like 8 people PvPing, drop it, and it's like boom, 8 people die. Like, yeah, ruined your day. And all these people, like, they're mostly Russians that have all these like top tier premiums, and you're like, let me introduce you to the overpowered tier 1 vehicle. And of course, you pick up these power-up crates on the map, which increase your gun damage, and they stack. And most people can only get to one before they have to keep fighting. But you're doing such a high speed, you can multiple stack power-up crates and just fly past and knock out T-14 Armatas in a single shot and drive on.
Amazing.
It's amazingly bad. It's so awful. It's brilliant. It is the Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus of the film world in a game. It's dreadful, and I recommend it to everyone. Especially as all the Russian players get salty as well, because you're just killing them. You're like, the more salt, the more I'm going to continue.
Well, I think we've kind of covered everything. Doesn't seem like there's too many more questions, so I think we can pretty much wrap it up for this stream. If you guys have a suggestion for the next stream, let us know, because I want to do at least one or two of these per month if I can. The name is not final. I just haven't figured out a name for it yet, so go ahead and once this stream is finished, go into the comments. Let us know what topic you'd like to see us discuss next. Maybe who you'd like to see on the stream, if I can get some other people on here. And we could also talk about what title for the stream, what series name for the stream you think would be good. And yeah, let me know what you guys think. And I think that'll wrap it up for this stream. Thank you all for coming and tuning in. Don't forget to check out Ed's channel in the description, especially if you want to check out the newer videos he has on tanks out on the range. So range target vehicles that have been left and sitting outside for quite a while. Something I don't think anybody else has really covered. So it's definitely an interesting topic. Check out.
And thanks for listening to my old rambles. It's always good. It's always nice to have the Coney fans.
I'll see if I can post all of the. I'll see if I can take some pictures of the specs and stuff of the Lockheed thing. I don't really feel like unfurling the blueprint right now, but eventually I'll get around to that. I might have a picture of it somewhere.
I think you should make a video on it, mate. I think you should make a video now. You've got it.
Yeah, the thing is, I've got so many things to cover already for tanks that I almost don't want to go into planes because that is just so much. I'm already doing the ship stuff. I'm already doing tanks.
I mean, well, let's be honest. I broke away and did the Catalinas with the rockets because I found them in the archives.
Yeah.
And nobody's ever covered Catalinas with rockets in all the photos. And I thought, yeah, this would be really cool. There's like 2,000 views because nobody's actually the people that like planes loved it, but most people that come to it want tanks. And then you start putting up flying boats. I'm like, but a flying boat is a sort of tank, isn't it? Really? No. But I love flying boats as well. I like trains, and nobody wants trains, and nobody really wants flying boats. So I just stick with tanks. But I don't know. Stick it up anyway for the fun of it.
Yeah, maybe I'll do like a special episode of Cursed by Design on it at some point once I get to it.
What you can do is you can say, look, this isn't just a plane I've got. This is like something I've brought that I own the copy of that nobody knows about. This is my special plane.
Got to find more information on it too, unfortunately, because there's not a lot out there from what I've seen. There's like a Wikipedia page and stuff, but there's not a whole heck of a lot of stuff on it. So a lot of the information that I have, I can't 100% verify other than the stuff that I have. So, but it does all seem to
all tie in.
Check out. So, I mean,
well, I look forward to that, mate. And until then, you're always welcome. And anybody has any other questions, I do have a Discord as well. Pop over if you've got one of those things like, I really need to know the answer to that. We have some pretty good people on there. We have various authors on the Discord. We have various tank people that can also give you a hand as well. So feel free to ask.
All right. Well, thank you, Ed. And thank you to everybody that came and checked out the stream. I'll see you guys in sometime next month. I'll try to let you guys know ahead of time more, but probably sometime, probably the same time of week, but later in September probably is when I'll do the next one. So I'll see you all then, and I'll see you all in the next video, hopefully on Friday, as long as that works.